Between 1938 and 1941, at both 6 Albion Street and Studio 5 of the Church Institute, they would have had an area to meet and greet those wanting clothes made for them, and their showroom and workroom staff attended to them before sewing clothes they'd designed themselves, like the one Christine Edwards also created, which will be in the Fashions Talk. Inside Mirelle gowns, there would be an area where mannequins showed items created by the design arm, and those and ready-to-wear would have been modelled together. Girls walking up and down with underwater slowness, grace and poise, turning occasionally to show how it looked from the side, or taking off a coat to display what it was teamed with to the women who watched like an audience in a theatre or cinema. The workroom was prominent in this time frame, the overlap between it and the showroom more explicit. Ready-to-wear was secondary to the dressmaking arm, and across Paris and in London's Mayfair, couture houses worked the same way as Mirelle gowns. Opulent areas of exclusivity and design, mannequins like Olga walked in single file, showing models, gliding across deep carpets like moving statues holding numbers in their hands. When she opened the House of Mirelle, Mira aspired to the continental approach and would have created the same. Jill Bradley, owner of Houlton Gray Modelling School and Agency, and a model herself from the 60s onwards, particularly remembered the way models had to glide across the floor smoothly so as not to look awkward or distract attention from the clothes. Sue, showroom girl in the late 50s to the mid-60s, said of Mirelle, it was really a salon, meaning a place similar to what would be found in Mayfair, where one-off exclusive items were personally displayed to clients, although not as expensive or intensive as the haute couture we know today that could run into thousands and thousands of pounds. In the 30s, it was expected that well-to-do women had clothes made for them, said Betty of the work she carried out in the workroom. But by the 60s, those expectations had changed, with mass production in the wake of Mary Quant, which you can hear about in the locations and in the fashions coming up soon. Do you think modelling has changed much since then? What are the main differences between then and now? Let us know in the comments below. Important between 1938 and 1949, selling and displaying clothes changed focus at Mirelle between 1950 and 51. In 1950, little Val came to Mirelle aged 50 primarily as a mannequin, she said, but when she left a year and a half later, they didn't need a dedicated model showing the change in focus to the way fashion was displayed and sold. A decade later, 21-year-old Sue went to London to the famous Lucie Clayton, who trained models like Jean Shrimpton, known as the Shrimp. And in the 70s, 16-year-old Maureen Gregory, who is a different person from Maureen Norris, trained at Houlton Gray, the local modelling school and agency, established by another name well known to the history of fashion in Hull, like Bobby, Mira and Molly. A contemporary of Mira's, Nancy Houlton Gray, had been a fashion buyer for Thornton Varley's department store and established her training school when she saw that local ladies were coming up in the world, meaning they might be the wives of suddenly successful local businessmen, and she thought that they needed a place to understand what cutlery to use and what to wear as well. When Maureen Gregory trained 12 or so years later, the company had changed to purely training models, and it was sold by Nancy to local girls Shirley Coates and Jill Bradley in the late 60s. You can see examples of Shirley's lookbook here, a tremendously successful model, alongside business partner Jill. Maureen Gregory worked solely at Carmichaels, which you can find out about in the locations, and did not model clothes in-house unless it was for in-house fashion shows with private invitations, an example of which you see here from Story Street before decimalisation happened in 1971. Although it's likely this card was talking about an external public fashion show with tickets at 5 shillings, a shilling being 5p in old sterling. When Little Val was in post between 1950 and 51, modelling was considered to be as essential to selling in the everyday workings of the shop, and that reflected the in-person nature of displaying clothes and accessories that was part of Mirelle's culture and what it was known for. A lot of Hull stores, like Thornton Varley's or Hammond's, or Marvan's fashion house, who bought Mirelle in 1978, also staged shows where Mary had lots of experience, for instance. You can find out about those shops in the locations. But those who went to them or modelled at them said none of them were like the ones people flocked to by the House of Mirelle, which were incredible for the way they were stage managed and the clothes on display. At an international Fantasia of fashion in October 1961, ballroom dancers danced along the catwalk, and the famous TV tenor Enrico Nobell sung his lilting, swooning songs. Mr. Nobell was also a furrier and owned what was, from the early 60s, called Noble Furs, misspelled in the write-up of the earlier fashion show where Sue modelled one of his dyed violet mink coats as Nobel Furs. It's worth an extraordinary amount of money if you look at the equivalent today. If you've watched the locations, you'll know this picture. But can you tell what fur Mira and her friend are wearing at Arosa ski resort? Do you think it might be the same as you see in this 1963 advert for Noble Furs? Let us know in the comments below.